thousands of pounds of cannabis seized by Idaho State Police. Troopers found 7,000 pounds of hemp in a truck near Boise last month. Owners say the product is perfectly legal industrial hemp, but state officials say field tests showed the load was positive for THC, which is illegal in Idaho no matter what substance it's in.
But now a bill is making its way through the State House that could make it easier for authorities to tell the difference.
In Idaho State Police seized more marijuana in 2017 than they did in the previous 3 years combined.
Possessing the smallest bit of marijuana is a misdemeanor in the state of Idaho. 3 full bags this size, that's a felony.
We're seeing a huge increase in possession throughout the state of Idaho, and we're also seeing an increase in trafficking cases.
As legal marijuana becomes a reality across the U.S., Idaho's putting up a fight. A proposed constitutional amendment that would prevent the legalization of pot in the state moved forward Friday.
Keep it illegal. Idaho lawmakers advanced a proposal to add a state constitutional amendment preventing the legalization of marijuana.
So now we've just added one more thing to throw out there to ruin lives, ruin marriages, ruin your opportunities at a successful job, life.
So, as you guys can see, over in Idaho, things are really strict when it comes to the herb. There's no medical, there's no rec, they're just fully against it. And in today's episode, we're going to literally hop over to one of the strictest states in Idaho and see what they got going on down there, because it seems that it may be changing in the future. A few groups are petitioning for change. And we're also going to have a look at the mandatory minimum sentencing, which is going through the state house right now. But first off, let's ask the question, is herb legal in Idaho? No, it's not legal in Idaho for any use whatsoever. No medical, no rec. Idaho's laws are among the strictest in the United States. So that got me wondering, how strict is strict? Let's have a look, just like what we do with some of the other states. Let's break it down in detail. 3 ounces or less, that's a misdemeanor, incarceration for a year, a maximum fine of $1,000. But anything over 3 ounces is a felony, 5 years, and a $10,000 fine. Now, when it comes to distribution, sale, or delivery, those are also pretty hefty charges. They're all felonies ranging from 1 to 5 years incarceration and up to $50,000. Now, as you guys can see right here, there are mandatory minimum sentences, and we will get into that in a bit. But when it comes to cultivation, if you're growing out in Idaho, it's an automatic felony, and the charges can range from 1 year to 5 years and up to $50,000. Now, what I found pretty interesting is that they actually had a miscellaneous section which says use or intoxication in public, that's a misdemeanor, 6 months, $1,000. So, intoxication in public, does that mean that if you're just stoned in the grocery store looking at some munchies to buy, that you're gonna get hit with a fine and thrown in jail? Sounds pretty crazy to me. But how would they even know? Like, if you're not smelling, you brush your teeth and stuff. I don't know. So things are really strict out in Idaho. I remember a while back there was actually a company which was sending flour from one state to another, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there was a truck with 7,000 pounds of herb in there. And the Idaho State Police literally seized that truck. And the Colorado-based company was suing, claiming that it was hemp. And that whole thing led to a lawsuit. And actually coming out of that lawsuit, it actually led to a bill which was proposed down in Idaho, which gave police equipment to distinguish between marijuana and hemp. So let's go ahead and have a look at that.
Well, if you recall, back in January, state police seized nearly 7,000 pounds of what they say is pot. The owner of the shipment says the plants are hemp. One problem, ISP doesn't have the equipment to tell the difference. In this case, troopers had to send a sample of the plants all the way to a crime lab in Kentucky to make a final determination. And now lawmakers are hoping to get that same equipment here, saving authorities both time and money.
As we look at appropriations of things that happen that we need to address in our current fiscal year, this seemed to be one of those emergencies.
Republican Senator Abby Lee is a big supporter of a bill that would give Idaho State Police $240,000 for equipment that can differentiate between pot and hemp. The bill recently passed the state Senate unanimously.
Currently, our state lab can only determine whether or not a product has THC or not. And so we can't tell percentages. And hemp is defined at the federal level as 0.3% THC or lower. So everything under our state lab testing is marijuana.
Hemp was declared legal under federal law with the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill. Still, hemp is not legal in Idaho. Other states like Oregon and Colorado have aligned their state laws with federal laws. Lawmakers like Lee and Republican Representative Scott Simey say Idaho should follow suit.
Most states are looking at conforming with that federal designation. We have a couple of pieces of legislation. We have a piece of legislation that's been proposed but has not made its way through to conform with the federal Farm Bill. But currently, any level of THC is illegal in our state.
And the current bill wouldn't change that. It would pay for testing equipment in Meridian, Coeur d'Alene, and Pocatello crime labs.
What we're trying to do is just get ahead of the game, because this is an interstate commerce issue now. And so we needed to give the state police some tools to help deal with that issue.
When we have stops, when we have prosecutions, we need to be able to turn this around pretty quickly and give our state police the tools that they need.
So you guys can see, because Idaho is so strict, it's actually causing problems when it comes to legal commerce. We all are familiar with the Farm Bill, aka the hemp bill. That mandates that anything with 0.3% or less is hemp. So in a situation where a company that's fully established, fully incorporated, and fully legal is shipping a legal hemp product from one state to another and it passes through Idaho, because their laws actually are so backward and conflict with even the federal laws, you can find yourself in hot water. Just a quick reminder, guys, if you're getting value from this video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support us further, join the ICANN VIP Bean Club or shop the merch store and cop some merch. Now, there's actually a group over in Idaho which is launching a petition to decriminalize personal use, and I think that that's fantastic. But before we get into that, let's have a look at what some of the police chiefs actually say and why they think that rec, medical, anything to do with herb is just a really bad idea.
A whole variety of reasons, and one of the things everybody always brought up for a whole variety of reasons, and one of the things everybody always brought up was, oh, we're going to get all this tax money from marijuana, life's going to be great. And my argument has always been the societal cost. Your taxes are never going to catch up to the societal cost. Look, take alcohol, for instance, and I'm no teetotaler. But the cost to society caused by drunk driving, caused by alcoholism, far outweighs the taxes we bring in from our alcohol sales.
Oh, yeah.
Marijuana is no different. So now we've just added one more thing to throw out there to ruin families, to ruin lives, ruin marriages, ruin your opportunities at a successful job, life. So you take all of those things, you put those in there. Now, you take marijuana and you take a look at what it did to California. You take and you look at what has happened in Colorado, what is going on in Oregon, what is going on in Washington, and tell me how successful this experiment was. And my other argument to that was, we are taking a generation of kids and we're doing a social experiment on them. And what are we going to do as we start to see these rises in mental health issues from chronic marijuana users? What are we going to do when we realize this social experiment has failed? We never get that genie back in the bottle. And then you brought it up, they're selling marijuana for cheaper because the taxes are so high in these other states. They can sell it for cheaper.
Right, so then you miss out on your tax revenue that you thought was justifying this entire thing.
And the argument in Oregon was, oh, marijuana legalization, less people will be using opioids if we're letting them smoke marijuana. And it proved to be completely false. And so now what are we dealing with? We are dealing with a state, Oregon, that has said, well, we're not even going to prosecute you if you have methamphetamine on you. As long as it's not a large amount, it's a small amount. We'll write you a ticket that says you can accept going to drug court or drug counseling in lieu of the ticket. Well, no one's doing that there. And it's a huge failure. I literally talked to a judge today, retired judge out of Oregon, moved to Idaho because of what a failure their policies have been in their judicial system over there for all the things that you talked about as well.
I would like to point out a few things because he sort of rolled up a bunch of things into one, and I think that that's not only unfair, but it's also downright ridiculous. Comparing alcohol and herb, I think if you did a poll asking the majority of Americans what they think, a lot of people will think alcohol is a lot more destructive. And actually, there was a poll which was recently done which shows that over 80% of America is in favor favor of some sort of legalization. Now, he also did cite certain states, and I think fair, in some of those states there is a crime problem, but I'm not necessarily sure that that is linked to anything to do with the good herb. The fact is, in some of those states there are something called soft on crime policies, and that in itself emboldens criminals. So I think those states need to look at their crime policies and their criminal judicial reform systems, rather than just simply blaming that on the herb. And now he also mentioned opioids, and he said that a lot of people who actually have advocated for herb, for medical herb, have said that it reduces the use of opioids. And he said that that's false, it's not true. But I would beg to differ, because according to this article right now, you guys can see clearly, headline, opioid prescriptions drop in states that legalize. Federally funded study shows suggesting some pain patients prefer the flower, the good herb. And that's also just a fact. We've covered that numerous times on this channel, where there are veterans, there are people who are suffering from pain and different types of issues, and they've replaced up to 11, 15, 20 medications simply by having medical herb. Now, we actually did a video on this recently, and we broke down why federal legalization may or may not happen, and one of those big factors is the big pharma. You guys know we're currently facing an opioid epidemic. Everyone knows that. So to hear him say something like that when it's just blatantly not true, I think is personally crazy. Now, the way that officer and a lot of people think in Idaho is not how every single person in Idaho thinks. There are a few people who actually disagree with that status quo, and that's reflected pretty clearly in the marijuana mandatory minimum sentence debate, which is going through the state house right now. So let's have a look at that.
I do not want to be in the state of Idaho and we fail to penalize crimes that are illegal.
Well, we do penalize crimes. We just don't force a mandatory minimum sentence for minor ones, but we might. Following up on something we talked about yesterday, bills taking a second lap around the state house after failing in the previous go-round. This afternoon, Republican Representative Bruce Skog and, as you saw, Jordan Redmond had another chance to have their mandatory minimum fine for marijuana get a full committee hearing. And you might remember last year, they tried to make that mandatory minimum a nice $420 for anyone caught with 3 ounces or less of marijuana. Now, putting aside the mandatory marijuana puns dropped by Representative Skog last session, that bill, it died in committee after several lawmakers pointed out commanding such a punishment would take away judicial discretion. There was also the concern of the financial strain of $420 in court costs on top of that. They would be putting that on low-income people who already find themselves, struggling to pay for things like rent and food, and now find themselves with a nonviolent drug conviction. That didn't stop Representative Skog and Jordan Redmond to bring it back again, though, this time dropping the minimum fine to $300 and having it not apply to those under the age of 18. That did not change the testimony, though, of those who stepped up to oppose House Bill 7, including several veterans who would like to see Idaho's stance on marijuana go, well, the other way.
Now, over in Idaho, mandatory minimum sentences are pretty common. And what a mandatory minimum sentence does is require judges to sentence offenders to a specific minimum prison term for a specific crime. And in relation to this crime that we're talking about right now, it's partaken in the good herb. Now, just a couple weeks ago, the Idaho House of Representatives voted largely among party lines to pass a new bill that will create a mandatory minimum fine of $300 for anyone convicted with possession. And you guys can see that's obviously pretty problematic. And a few veterans actually spoke out against this, so let's have a look at what they had to say.
That did not change the testimony, though, of those who stepped up to oppose House Bill 7, including several veterans who would like to see Idaho's stance on marijuana go, well, the other way, at least when it comes to its medicinal benefits, like Sergeant Jeremy Kitzhaber, a disabled veteran with stage 4 cancer. Cancer, he says, he got from his time in the Air Force handling radioactive materials. He said he's been prescribed opioids to deal with the pain of his treatment, which he said are much more dangerous than marijuana. Even though he has not used marijuana, he wouldn't want to see the punishment for those who choose to use it for pain mandated. Sergeant Kitzhaber also pointed out another issue he sees with this bill, after looking through all 89 chapters of Idaho Code on crimes and punishments.
Now, before we actually hear what the veteran had to say, I want you guys to understand the importance of this. By basically codifying a mandatory minimum sentence when it comes to herb, the judge no longer has discretion to let you off, to say, okay, well, you're using this for medical purposes, I won't charge you. You won't get a fine or won't go to jail. What this does is actually codify that charge. Despite the fact that it's what some people may deem as a nominal fee in $300, the implications are in fact a bit wider than that.
If House Bill 7 is passed, it would be disproportionate to all other misdemeanors in the state of Idaho, and it would single out this one specific crime. There is no other minimum fine I could find for a misdemeanor in the state of Idaho under these statutes.
And that's true. No other misdemeanor conviction carries a minimum penalty. They all have maximums, but no minimums. Like if you drink or drink and drive drunk, or you're impaired, you assault somebody, or you try to strangle them.
Wow.
If you start a riot, if you commit domestic battery, sexual battery, or a doctor sexually assaults a patient, all are misdemeanors and all threaten public safety, but none of them have a mandatory minimum attached to them.
Meaning that you can get off with a slap on the wrist, but in the case of the good herb, you will get a fine. There's no if, ands, or but about it. You're gonna get fined.
Representative Redmond said the purpose of the bill was to provide conformity in the judicial system and create a deterrent. Well, in today's more than 2 hours of testimony, conservative organizations spoke in favor of it, while those who want to legalize medicinal marijuana, they spoke against it. Law enforcement supported it, while defense lawyers didn't, because they know mandatory minimums, well, they aren't a deterrent, but mostly because they also see it as a blurring of the lines between the branches of government. The judicial branch should not interfere in the legislative, and vice versa.
We put great thought into our selection of judges in Idaho. We should trust them to know their cases individually. We should trust them to exercise their judgment appropriately in each case. I'm here to tell you that liberal Idaho judges who hand out candy sentences is not a thing. I practice all across the state, federal court, state court. I practice in, I believe, in every county now in the state of Idaho. That's not a thing. Our judges should be trusted to do the right thing.
So as you guys can see, as far as they're concerned, Herb, in Idaho, that's not a thing. It's not a thing. It ain't happening. But you know what they say? Sometimes small steps are the best way to get things done. And I think that that's what this group is doing over in Idaho, because they're petitioning for at least it to be decriminalized when it comes to personal amounts.
A local organization is hoping that third time's a charm for getting a marijuana initiative on the ballot in Idaho.
A petition is being launched to put a vote on decriminalizing personal marijuana use on Idaho's 2026 ballot. Our Jude Binkley joins us now. Jude, you spoke with the group behind this initiative. What can you tell us?
Well, Brenda, Joe, this petition is being launched by a group called Kind Idaho. The advocacy group has tried twice in the past to get medical marijuana on the ballot, and Kind Idaho Treasurer Joe Evans says this petition is different because it aims to decriminalize personal use and decriminalize personal production or growth of marijuana.
We are not creating a resale market. We're not making sale of any of this legal in the state. We just want to be able to say, hey, your medicine, your body, do it your way.
Fair.
As long as you're taking care of yourself and just yourself, there's no reason for the state to get involved with what you're doing.
And Evans says they've seen pretty widespread support for personal use decriminalization. The group thinks this new petition will resonate with voters more because of its simplicity. Unlike previous petitions that have failed, this 2026 initiative doesn't require setting up a medical marijuana program and registry through the state.
Interesting.
We'd like those people to be able to go across the border, get their medicine, get their self-care, and be able to come back without worrying about being arrested, without worrying about losing their vehicle to civil forfeiture. We want them to be able to make it home with their medicine, with their product, and be able to use it comfortably in their own spaces. We make the roads safer through this process. We reduce the number of interactions with our police force. You know, our police are no longer feeling responsible to take care of these minor issues with our citizens, with our residents.
Kind Idaho plans on debuting the petition at Boise Pride this weekend. After that, they'll submit the petition to the Secretary of State next week, and then Joe, Brenda, they'll have to start collecting signatures to qualify for the ballot.
And again, just to clarify, Jude, this wouldn't be on this November's ballot?
It'd be the 2026 ballot, correct?
Okay, if it qualifies, all right.
Qualifies.
We'll keep an eye on it.
So there are a lot of hoops to jump through when it comes to even getting something onto the ballot. You got a petition, get a ton of signatures, but at least they're trying to take steps, baby steps, in the right direction. But I also think he raises a ton of important points. A lot of people will probably just go to neighboring states and get their medicine, and when they come into Idaho, oh my gosh, you're going to be in trouble. So at least by decriminalizing it, people will no longer be in fear of getting their medicine. But the mandatory minimum sentence says a whole nother thing. So let me know what you guys think about all that. Drop it in the comments down below. I want to find out what you guys got to say, what you guys think about the strictest state when it comes to the good herb. Do you guys think it's crazy? Would you guys live out there or would you guys not? Are you in favor of it or are you guys not? I mean, I hear pretty decent arguments on both sides, but you guys know where I land. Now today we did focus on Idaho, but there are a lot of states making changes when it comes to their laws, some of them good, some of them bad, so check this video out to find out if your state will be affected, because it's coming up right now.